Assistant Professor of Public Policy and Administration, Rutgers University, Camden, Stephen Danley, is joining us. And, Professor, welcome to the show, and so good of you to be here today. Thanks.
Oh, thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you. And there was an article written, Matt Taibbi in Rolling Stone, very critical, detrimental, concerning the city of Camden. You're a teacher there, and I was reading with interest about some of your students and their reaction to this article that was in Rolling Stone, and students who have take pride in the city and say there was nothing reported about that was optimistic, and that it was totally a negative piece, and what are the ramifications, societal ramifications of businesses, of people thinking to move, to invest, the local city itself. And so welcome to the show, Professor, and give me your reaction to this. And basically, what was Taibbi saying about Camden?
You know, he went in looking for a piece about poverty and crime, and he talked to the people you would talk to if that's what you wanted to talk about, and that's the piece you got, you know?
And you had the best headline as your response to that, where you basically said this was poverty porn. You don't often hear the words poverty and porn together, but you managed to pull that off.
You know, it's something we talk about in my class all the time because my students are used to seeing it, particularly the ones from Camden. They're used to hearing about how bad their city is and having to go out and defend it and rep it a little bit.
So what is it, you know, the article, a couple things that I think Taibbi got was wrong on, just flatly wrong on. Camden did something that I think was amazing. They merged the police force. County of Camden has a countywide police force now, and I thought that was a great thing. And that was really shepherded by the freeholders in Camden County. And yet the article made it sound like Christie, that was his thing, and it really wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, the Metro Police thing is pretty controversial here, and that's in no small part because the citizens actually sued the city to stop it from happening until they could get a vote, and won that lawsuit, but it was after it happened. And I think the issues that people have with the Metro Police are as much about the process as about the policy.
So what makes it poverty porn? I mean, what does that phrase mean? And then what particularly about this piece by Matt Taibbi in Rolling Stone, Professor, rises it to that level?
Yeah, I mean, if you flip through the pictures, and I had a student who came in and printed the article out, there are pictures of people shooting up heroin right in the middle of the magazine. It's designed to be as provocative as possible. The Courier Post recently called it a highlight reel. You know, not something you'd expect to see even if you went through the worst parts of Camden, but something you'd see over a number of years, the worst stories. And that's designed to get a reaction and get readership, not designed to be an accurate reflection of the city.
But what about the reality, Professor, of some of the numbers and statistics concerning the city? An estimated 175 open-air drug markets in Camden, in a city of less than 9,000 square miles. You got a population of about 77,000. They talk about the municipal tax revenue, $25 million in 2011. Didn't even pay for the $65 million police force. The police chief, guy by the name of J. Scott Thompson, said that Camden was somewhere between Honduras and Somalia in terms of its crime. In 2011 and 12, there were times when fewer than 20 cops were patrolling the streets of Camden. And so let me get you to react to that first, and then we're going to talk a little bit about surveillance and what's going on in Camden as well. But the reality is, to an extent, Professor Danley, the reality, is it not?
There's no doubt that Camden has issues. I don't think anyone's going to argue that. The problem is looking at those issues without looking at the regional history. You know, you talk about a city that's troubled. It's literally been dumped upon from the suburbs around it. That's a trash-to-steam facility that was put in and is now out of commission. That's literally human waste being sent to waterfront south. The drug trade, the best statistic from this article was that 85% of the heroin trade came from the suburbs. It's been a long history of South Jersey dumping its problems into Camden and then blaming Camden for them.
There's a thing, Professor, where they had surveillance cameras that showed people coming to Camden to buy drugs. They were mostly, you know, white kids from the suburbs who were coming to Camden to buy drugs. But there's a piece of this, the surveillance city of Camden, that really opened my eyes. I mean, there's microphones and cameras, and they have this mobile crane, this 30-foot mobile crane called Sky Patrol. Is all of this surveillance in Camden, is any of their questions about the constitutionality of any of this?
You know, I think there's a weird thing happening, which is that you've got what they call the Star Wars and RoboCop approach. But what the communities are really asking for are beat patrols and community policing. And that's the real hope with the Metro Police, is that they'll get more folks on the ground and walking so that they know the community in the same way that the policemen used to when they were drawn from the city.
So if Taibbi were to write positives about the city of Camden. Give me 2 or 3 areas where you would have hoped that he would have focused on for this article.
Yeah, I mean, the first place you start is with the institutions, and particularly the hospitals and some of the education institutions. I think there's a lot going on. There was a parade just a few weeks ago, a Christmas parade, and the Sophisticated Sisters, one of the dancers, stood up and said, "This is our way of letting the world know we are here."
Yeah.
Start with that story. Start with resiliency. Start with the people who have chosen to live here or had to live here and have found ways to do it. With the Settlement Music School just off Market Street, there's a lot going on that's wonderful.
What is it? Well, let me ask you this, Professor. What is it in any urban area, and it doesn't have to be strictly Camden? What and I gave you a recitation of some of these numbers which are absolutely calamitous and disastrous for any city to behold. What are the chief contributing factors for these numbers in a city like Camden?
You're talking in terms of crime here?
Yeah.
I mean, the drug trade is obviously a really big part of it, but these numbers follow poverty. And so when you have a city that has had regional agreements to have all the low-income housing built in the city,
right.
Where legally this is now illegal to do this, but where other cities didn't want to have poor folks in their communities, so they sent the poor housing to Camden.
Right. Mount Laurel came in, they could trade off to other communities who would take their quotas that they needed and then build the housing in their communities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And these are issues you find when communities struggle. You know, you had during the mayoral campaign here, there was a jobs fair, and thousands of people showed up to try to get jobs. There's just a lack of opportunity in certain areas of Camden, and folks are fighting and trying to get through with that.
You also had a lot of political corruption over the years in Camden as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the things that always amazed me was Camden, you know, the city itself. It's right on the water. I mean, it's been given a lot of goodies from the state. You know, the Battleship New Jersey, the state aquariums there. You've got the Susquehanna Center, which I've seen a number of shows there. You've got the light rail in and out of the city. But you know what's amazing, though, is that I took my wife to see Blake Shelton play at the Susquehanna Center.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a great night. But we wanted to go to dinner first. There are no restaurants there. There's nowhere to go to dinner in Camden. There's opportunity there. But the way I read something like this piece, Professor, is if I'm thinking of investing in Camden, I read a piece like this and I say, no way, no how. But I've got a friend who runs Cooper's Ferry Development Project, and you know they are trying to lure investors there. Pieces like this probably don't help. At the same time, I guess you have to kind of make the argument, well, people should know about what's going on in Camden, right?
Well, you certainly need to know and need to have a reasonable discussion, and that's why the piece was so disappointing. But I call that waterfront development field of dreams development. You know, if you build it, they will come. It's not integrated into the neighborhoods or the communities, and that's really what people are trying to do now is integrate so that you have that. That's a difficult thing to do. People came in for the 4th of July, and police are literally turning them away from certain neighborhoods to keep them out. That's the mentality. We're going to bring people in from the suburbs, and they're going to be stuck there. And actually, Cooper Grand is starting to change that. They have some neighborhood initiatives. They're realizing it's not going to be enough just to do the waterfront. They're going to have to link that to the rest of the community.
Here's one of the big problems that I have with this, Professor, and I guess this would be in the most utopic situation that this would come out and have a real prominence. My problem is that people are always equating socioeconomic conditions to crime, as though a mother and father in a pressure situation in an urban environment somehow is not able to impart on their children let's keep it as simple as we can, the difference between right and wrong. And is it because you're in this kind of an environment, is that a plausible excuse to have 175 open-air drug markets in this city? Is that an excuse for the police chief to say Camden is somewhere between Honduras and Somalia? Where does personal responsibility come into all of this, regardless of the economic, societal environment in which these people live?
Well, and that's exactly the story I wish Matt had written. I wish he had written a story about how do families deal with the issues around them and the drug trade around them and try to find sanctuaries and become resilient. I imagine that if you walk through Camden neighborhoods and got to know families there, you'd actually be inspired. But it's very difficult when your peers are at school and they're selling drugs or getting in fights and there's guns on the street, and it doesn't always feel safe to walk through certain neighborhoods around which you live. That's a difficult way to raise a child, and you'd be inspired by some of the stories of folks who have done it.
All right. Assistant Professor of Public Policy and Administration, Rutgers University, Camden, Stephen Danley. And Professor, you're a resident of the city, are you not?
That's correct. I moved here in July.
All right, sir. Thank you so much, and thanks for being a part of that city and trying to make it a little bit better. So
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Professor. Thank you. You know, Rich, it's a tough sell, man. It's a tough sell to try to write an article that has platitudes and great things about the city. There's just not a lot to write about. Let's be realistic here. When you take a look at the education, you take a look at the environment. But I'm going to tell you, Rich, it all goes back for me to the parents, and it goes back to the guardian, whether it's a single-family home. And I have never, ever, ever, and Rich, I'll tell you, I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood, so I'm not going to sit here and profess that I have intimate knowledge of what it's like to grow up in an urban environment. But I do know that parents should have the innate ability to talk to their children, to address their children. I know we're going to talk about mental health a lot coming up in relation to school shootings and bills that are being proposed right now. But for me, it all starts, the epicenter of this whole deal is at the home. It's in the home, Rich.
Well, I also think it's in the schools. And one of the problems with Camden
the schools are why they are, because of the product that is being sent to those schools.